Down the streets of Baton Rouge, Louisiana. The night was peaceful, quiet at this hour. Monica Carter, a 38-year-old state attorney, had just finished a long day at the courthouse. Her mind was still filled with legal strategies as she drove her black Lexus down Perkins Road. Heading toward home, the streetlights stretched out before her, casting soft glows on the nearly empty road. Her phone buzzed in the cup holder, another email. Probably about tomorrow's meeting with the Attorney General's office. She sighed, exhausted but focused, signaling to merge into the right lane. That's when she saw them. Red and blue lights suddenly flared behind her, flashing in the rearview mirror like a warning shot. A sharp breath escaped her lips. She wasn't speeding. She wasn't swerving. What now? Monica exhaled, steadying herself as she pulled to the side. She knew the drill. Hands on the wheel, no sudden movements, interior lights on, the weight of her experience, both as a black woman and a legal professional, pressed down on her chest. The police cruiser rolled up behind her. A figure stepped out, Officer Greg Hensley. He was young, broad-shouldered, walking with a sense of authority that felt just a little too forced. Monica lowered her window before he could tap on it. "Good evening, officer. Is there a problem?" Her voice was calm, steady. Hensley tilted his head, flashlight flicking across her face before it shifted to her briefcase on the passenger seat. "License and registration," he said, his tone clipped. Detached. Monica reached over slowly, grabbing her wallet from her bag. "May I ask why I'm being stopped?" He didn't answer, just stared at her ID for a long moment before glancing back at her. Failed to signal that last turn. Monica knew better. She had signaled twice out of habit. It was a weak excuse. But she wasn't about to argue, not yet. "I see." Hensley cut her off. "Where are you headed tonight?" Monica's grip tightened on the wheel. "Home." His flashlight lingered over the interior of her car, briefcase. The neatly pressed navy blue pantsuit she was still wearing from court. The air shifted. "Step out of the vehicle." The words hit like a hammer. Monica blinked, lips parting in disbelief. "Excuse me," I said. "Step out of the car." She swallowed, the burn rising in her throat. She had seen cases like this too many times. She knew what this was. "Officer, I'm an attorney. I just left work. I don't care who you are." Hensley snapped. "Step out." A slow, unsettling realization set in. He wasn't listening. He had already made up his mind about her. She had two choices: comply or escalate. And she already knew how that second option ended. Monica inhaled deeply, then pushed open the door. But something about the way Hensley reached for his holster made her stomach turn. The pavement felt cool beneath her heels as she stepped out of the car, keeping her movements controlled, her hands visible, her back straight. Hensley took a half step back, one hand hovering near his gun. Monica held his gaze. "There's no need for that." Hensley's jaw tightened, his eyes scanning her like he was searching for a reason to justify whatever he had already decided in his mind. "Turn around." Hands on the roof of the car. A sharp breath filled Monica's lungs. But she held it in. "Not here. Not like this. Officer. I have no weapons. I've committed no crime," she said, her voice steady. Her pulse thudded in her ears. But Monica controlled the panic that threatened to rise. "You refuse to comply." His voice now held an edge, a challenge creeping in. Monica met his stare, unflinching, strong as a mountain under the sun. "I'm asking for a reason," she said, steady. "Failing to signal doesn't justify a search." Hensley's smirk spread, as though he had been waiting for her to say this. A look in his eyes like the wolf waiting for the deer to stray too far. "You're being uncooperative," he said, the word cold, cutting through the air. The word hit Monica like a winter gust, a shiver running down her spine. She had heard it before, so many times in court, where she had sat across from defendants who were pulled over for nothing more than their skin. Then made to feel as if their very presence was a threat, Monica closed her eyes for a brief moment. Grounding herself, her thoughts clearer now, she had to hold herself steady. "I want to speak to your sergeant," she said, her voice firm, unyielding. That was when the world shifted. Before she could make sense of it, Hensley's hand shot out and grabbed her arm. Hard, she stumbled slightly, catching herself against the car, but his grip was relentless. "Hey," Monica snapped, jerking back, a sudden heat rising in her chest. Out of line, she thought, but her words fell to the wind. Hensley didn't hesitate. Without warning, he spun her around, yanking her arm behind her back. Pain shot up through her shoulder. A gasp escaped her lips. "You can't do this," she shouted, her voice filled with disbelief. "You're resisting arrest," Hensley muttered, his tone flat, as if this was nothing more than another day. Another routine. Monica's head turned, trying to see beyond him, but panic began to claw at her chest, squeezing her breath away. "For what?" she asked. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. The cold snap of metal bit into her wrists. The handcuffs locked into place. Tight and unforgiving, the world around her felt suddenly small, suffocating. The traffic sounds from a distant road blurred into nothingness. A muffled hum, as if she were underwater. This wasn't happening. Not to her, not to a state attorney who had fought her entire career against this very abuse of power, and yet here she was. Bound in this cruel reality. She squeezed her eyes shut, trying to hold back the flood of emotions that threatened to drown her. Swallowing the fire of rage building inside her, she bit back her anger. "Not here, not now." Hensley gripped her arm, guiding her toward his squad car. "Where are you taking me?" she demanded, twisting just enough to glance at him. "You'll find out soon enough," he said, shoving her forward. The door slammed shut behind her, and the weight of reality settled in. She was under arrest for what? For existing? For asking questions? For challenging authority? They had no right to do this. Her breathing slowed, steadying as her fingers flexed against the tight cuffs. The metal pressed into her skin, a constant sting. She wasn't afraid. She was furious. And Greg Hensley had no idea what he had just done. But he was about to find out. The squad car smelled of stale coffee and sweat. Monica sat rigid in the back seat, her wrists aching from the too tight cuffs. Her breathing was slow and measured. Outside, the streetlights blurred past, but she wasn't focused on them. She was replaying everything, every word, every movement, every decision Hensley had made. He wanted this to happen. The car rattled slightly as it hit a pothole. Up front, Hensley was silent, gripping the wheel with one hand, the other resting near his radio. Monica's voice cut through the silence. "You know this is a mistake," she said. Hensley didn't answer. Her jaw clenched. "You had no probable cause to search my car. No reason to escalate. You realize that, right?" "Still, nothing." Monica leaned forward slightly, her voice now lower, controlled but edged with something dangerous. "When we get to the station, I want my phone call." A smirk tugged at the corner of Hensley's mouth as he glanced at her through the rearview mirror. "Yeah?" he said, his voice laced with amusement. "Who are you calling? Your boyfriend?" Monica didn't blink. The attorney. For the first time since this ordeal began, the smirk that usually rested on Hensley's face disappeared. He paused, uncertainty flickering in his eyes for the briefest moment. But it was gone just as quickly. "Nice try," he muttered, his voice low, as though he wished he had not let her see that doubt. "Tell that to booking." Monica leaned back, releasing a slow breath. She let him hold on to his belief. After all, she knew everything was about to shift. The patrol car rolled into the precinct's parking lot. Hensley was the first to step out, slamming his door with a forceful snap. He yanked her door open, grabbing her arm firmly, pulling her out with enough strength to make a statement. But Monica did not resist. She walked ahead, her heels striking the pavement, the rhythm sharp and deliberate. Her back was straight, her head held high. Every officer in the precinct was about to understand exactly who she was. She could hardly wait to see the expressions on their faces. Inside, the fluorescent lights of East Baton Rouge Police Station buzzed above, their harsh glow flickering across the booking area. Monica strode through the door, wrists still cuffed, her mind as clear as the sky on a crisp morning. Hensley, still gripping her arm tightly, guided her forward, wanting to prove something. Monica, however, let him believe what he needed. The tension between them was like the wind, ever present. But she did not allow it to sway her. At the front desk stood a stocky officer, probably in his mid-50s, his salt and pepper hair and thick mustache making him look like someone who had lived through every storm life had to offer. Sergeant Roy Blanchard. His eyes never fully left the paperwork in front of him when he spoke. "What do you have?" "Hensley?" he asked, his voice like the rumble of distant thunder. Barely glancing up, Hensley stood straighter, a proud stance as if to show that he was still in control. "Driving reckless," he said. "Wouldn't cooperate." Monica took in a sharp breath, almost like a laugh. She could sense that everything was about to change. Sergeant Blanchard finally looked up. His gaze moved over her, taking in her tailored pantsuit, her briefcase still tucked tightly under Hensley's arm. And then, finally, her face. In that moment, something shifted in Blanchard's expression. Recognition. His eyes widened just slightly, as if a fog had cleared from his mind. Monica Carter stood still, her gaze unwavering. For a moment, Blanchard's eyes widened. "Wait a moment," he said, his voice sharp, like a hawk's cry. "Is that?" Monica tilted her head slightly, her lips curling into the first trace of a smirk. "Monica Carter," she said evenly, her voice as steady as the river flowing through the canyon. "State Attorney." Silence filled the room, thick and heavy like the heat of the midday sun. Blanchard's face drained of color, and his eyes darted between Hensley and Monica. Then, in an instant, he was on the move, his steps quick as a deer's leap. "Hensley, get those cuffs off her." "Now." Hensley frowned, his voice hesitant. "Sir, I said now." Blanchard snapped. Hensley's fingers twitched near his belt, but he hesitated. "Jesus Christ," Blanchard muttered, shoving past Hensley. He unlocked the cuffs himself with swift, practiced hands. As the cuffs fell away, Monica rolled her shoulders, the tension lifting, and rubbed her wrists where the metal had dug in like a jagged stone. The room stood frozen, still as the desert at twilight. Blanchard turned on Hensley, his voice low and sharp, like a storm warning on the horizon. "Do you have any idea who you just arrested?" Hensley stiffened, his jaw tight. He refused to comply with the weight of Blanchard's words. Blanchard's expression darkened, and the air thickened around them. "She's the damn prosecutor overseeing police misconduct cases for the entire state." The words landed like thunder, heavy and unyielding. The color drained from Hensley's face, his confidence slipping away. Monica took her time, as calm as the winds that sweep across the plains. She reached into her bag, the one Hensley had rifled through as if she were a trespasser, and pulled out a sleek, black business card. She placed it gently on the booking desk like an offering to the spirits. The card read, "Monica Carter, State Attorney's Office, Civil Rights Division." Hensley swallowed hard, his throat dry like the earth before rain. For the first time all night, he looked unsure, as if he stood at the edge of a cliff, uncertain of the fall. Monica's eyes met his, her voice calm but sharp, like the edge of a stone knife. "You just made the worst mistake of your career." Blanchard turned back to Monica, his tone now careful and respectful, like the whispers of elders around a fire. "Miss Carter, I sincerely, Apologize for this, Blanchard began, but Monica's gaze remained steady, unwavering. No, Sergeant, she replied, her voice firm. This is not just a misunderstanding. This is a pattern. Blanchard let out a slow breath, pressing his fingers to his forehead. He looked weary, and there was a long pause. Is there anything I can do? He asked quietly. As though hoping for a different answer, Monica's lips curled into a smile. But there was no warmth in it. Yes, she said, her voice steady and resolute. I'd like my phone call. Tomorrow. The entire city would learn exactly what had happened this night. The phone in the sergeant's office rang twice before a familiar voice answered. Low but sharp, as if already prepared for what was to come. Robert. It's me, Monica said. Her words measured a pause. Then, his voice shifted, filled with a certain alertness. Monica, what's going on? Monica glanced toward the one-way glass, knowing Blanchard and Hensley were likely standing there, watching, waiting. I was just arrested. The line went silent for a moment before the measured fury of Robert Keller's voice broke through. Give me the address, he commanded. She gave it to him. I'm on my way, he said, and the phone clicked in her ear. She set the phone down gently, smoothing her suit as she rose to her feet. Prepared. Blanchard cleared his throat. Carter, he started. Monica held up her hand, cutting him off. Don't, she said firmly. His mouth snapped shut. The tension in the room thickened. 20 minutes passed before the door burst open. Robert Keller entered like a storm, tall, commanding, a man who never wasted words. Behind him, 2 state investigators followed. The room fell still. Keller's eyes locked onto Monica. Are you all right? He asked, his voice softer now, but still filled with authority. Monica nodded once. I will be, she assured him. Keller turned to Blanchard. Sergeant, let's talk about how one of your officers just arrested my state prosecutor on a fabricated charge. Blanchard visibly swallowed. But before he could say anything, Keller cut him off. Not here, in your office, now. Blanchard rushed ahead, already knowing the kind of storm he was facing. They led him inside. Hensley stood by the desk, uneasy for the first time that night. He seemed smaller, his power fading. Monica walked up beside him, close enough that her voice was for him alone. You thought I was just some woman you could push around, she said softly. You thought my voice wouldn't matter. Hensley did not respond, because there was nothing left to say. But Monica wasn't done. I handle cases like this every day. Officer Hensley, you know what happens next, she said. He swallowed, his breath catching, but he didn't meet her eyes. You will be investigated. Your body cam footage will be reviewed. Your record will be pulled, she continued. And when the world sees what you did tonight, she let her words hang in the air. Exhaling slowly, you won't just be another cop with a badge. Her voice dropped, more intense now. You'll be a liability. Hensley stayed silent because he knew she was right. The weight of the truth pressed heavy on his chest. Moments later, the door to the sergeant's office swung open. Keller stepped out first, his expression unyielding, like stone. Monica, he said, his voice firm. Are we pressing charges? Hensley's breath caught, and in that instant, he realized, just like that, his career was over. But this wasn't just about him. This was about every time a badge had been used as a weapon. It was about every person without a title, without connections, without power, who had been pulled over and given no chance to defend themselves. Tonight, Monica had power, and she was determined to use it. The next morning, Monica woke to her phone buzzing non-stop. News outlets, colleagues, civil rights groups. The story had already broken by noon. The body cam footage was released, and the world saw everything. How Hensley's tone had changed the moment he saw her face. How he had ignored her credentials, dismissed her rights, and escalated without cause. And people were angry. The mayor's office issued a statement. An internal investigation was launched. Hensley was suspended without pay. But Monica knew what would come next. They would call it a one-time mistake. They would say Hensley was just one bad officer. But she had spent her career in courtrooms, proving otherwise. That night, she stood in front of the cameras, her eyes sharp and direct, gazing straight into the lens. "This isn't about me," she said. "It's about what happens when power is abused. It's about the people who don't have an attorney general on speed dial. The people who don't make the news. The people who don't have a voice in the courtrooms." Her words hung in the air, heavy, like the weight of the mountains themselves. The microphones flashed. Journalists scribbled notes. But Monica wasn't finished. "We keep saying, bad apples. But we never talk about the trees that grow them," she said, her voice steady and unwavering. A hush fell over the crowd, like the quiet before a storm. "This stops when we start holding law enforcement truly accountable. When we change the system that allows this to happen over and over again," she continued. "We can no longer stay silent. We cannot turn our backs. The voices of the people must be heard." Monica let her words sink into the silence. "The quiet before change. I was lucky," she said, her voice calm but firm. "But I shouldn't have had to be." The press conference ended. But the conversation had only just begun that night. Monica sat alone in her office, gazing out over the city she had spent years fighting for. She had fought for justice in the courtrooms. But maybe, just maybe, her next fight would be even bigger. This, she knew, was just the beginning. If this story moved you, don't let it end here. Demand accountability. Speak out. Stay informed. Vote for change. Because if Monica's story teaches us anything, it is that power only changes when the people refuse to stay silent.